Let's move on to law and licensing. And I'll just invite you, Chair Lear. I won't recognize you every time as you see.
I'll just keep going.
Just keep going.
Item 10.2 on our discussion agenda, R277-307. Discussion about a teacher leader rule. The committee moves the board approve R277-307, teacher leader draft 3 to the committee for approval on second and final reading.
Seeing no discussion, there's a motion on the floor that the board approves R277-307. Teacher, Board Member Earl?
Yes, I have some discussion. Just one moment if I can pull it up. I have a question. In some areas, I'm wondering if we're extending beyond the law. And let me just ask, it's online. Let me go down. I know the law tells us to define it, and I just have some questions if someone
And
maybe could answer this. So on line 62 and line 61, so it says education ambassador, including networking within and beyond local, state, and national education organizations, or serving on task force committees and advisory boards, which I'm just wondering, what is 62? It seems like it's expanding beyond the scope of a teacher leader within a school, who is a teacher within a school. And then, can I ask, well, answer that, and then I'll extend to the second part.
Please, Dr. Thronson.
Thank you. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. So one example I can give that helps to make it clear is our Utah Teacher of the Year. They, navigate local, national, and state. And so that's an example of a teacher leader that serves in that capacity.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, so on 68, it says a reduction in the teacher leader's regular classroom workload. My question corresponds with 2 in that, could it be that a teacher could be teaching a third of the hours of a normal teacher and then spend their time lobbying, networking, or whatever for the local, state, national education organizations of some type?
If the LEA chose to pay them for that, they could.
So then my question becomes, should we put some stipulation upon that on 62, and maybe I'll be making amendment to that? I'm just trying to get some feel for the appropriateness of us paying for, as taxpayers, an educator lobbying at a significant part of their day or time. And I'm just saying lobbying because I'm not sure what all of this education ambassador really would entail. It's kind of broad here, especially when you're talking organizations, possibly with extending beyond the state of Utah. So that could, an education entity could be funding a teacher who works part-time as a teacher and full-time as some kind of advocacy group. Or not advocacy, but they could be advocating. I'm only asking if that, in theory, that could be taking place. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure what the law is for teachers and lobbying, and if they're allowed to do that as a teacher. I would yield to someone else wiser than me.
Board Member Lear.
We didn't have that. That's an interesting angle to this that we didn't discuss in the committee. My thinking is, well, let me make an analogy. There have been many LEAs now that have dealt with board members who are also on their, are also employees of their LEAs. Every LEA that I know of, and I could name 5 or 6, has been very thoughtful in saying, does this benefit the LEA? Do we want to use the money allotted to us as the LEA how do we want to use it in supporting this board member or limiting the board member? I'm comfortable with leaving that decision to the LEA and not putting constraints around the LEA's decision with its employment money that does come from taxpayers and making those decisions locally. All of them being very thoughtful about what benefits the LEA with that employee and what does not.
Thank you. Board Member Earl, do you have a follow-up comment?
This wasn't previously in there. This is part that was changed moving into this, going from the one to the other. So this is the specific area that was changed, and that's why I have a question or concern there. The serving on task force committees and advisory groups, I think that's something that a teacher leader probably is very capable of doing, especially within their LEA. I actually I'd like to make a motion that we strike line 62 and 63, leaving in line 64 the way it's read. So do you want me to give the actual wording on it?
There's a motion on the floor to strike lines 62 and 63. Is that right, Board Member Earl?
Yes.
To strike lines 62 and 63 of R277-307, Teacher Leader Draft 3. Do we have a second?
Second.
Did I hear a second over here? Board Member Klein is a second. Speaking to the motion, do you want to speak again, Board Member Earl?
Yeah, just, I think there's some ambiguity there that I think it still allows what Member Lear is saying, that serving on task force committees, advisories, and being able to advocate as an ambassador in some capacities, but I'm just not sure, and this is extenuating beyond the previous role we had, and so I would, anyways, I think it still allows for some of those things to take place without extenuating beyond that.
Thank you. Board Member Hanson?
Yeah, I was just looking at this and thinking about our Teacher of the Year. If we strike all that, how does that impact? I assume that they would be a teacher leader and they would be engaging in most of those activities that are laid out. How would this impact those activities?
Dr. Thronson?
Yeah, so they could still, the LEA has the authority to choose if they're allowed to do those things with or without it being in this rule. This is just one of the ways that we would designate in that this rule for what a teacher leader is, one of the things they would do. So like our Hope Street Fellows, they do some of this work in the Hope Street as well. During session, they're up there advocating for different things. And so this is something that happens whether it's in the rule or not. And so it would still be available. It just wouldn't necessarily, and if they wanted to incentivize it with pay at an LEA level, they could still do that as well.
Vice Chair Belknap?
Yeah, I actually am speaking in favor of this because in this rule, it almost says you almost have to do these things to be considered a leader. And I'm not sure that doing one of those things makes it be required to be a leader. There's other things to do to be a leader.
Dr. Thronson, you want to address that question? Is that required?
I don't have a question on that, it's just a comment.
Okay. Board Member Lear.
Oh, no, Natalie was,
Sorry, Board Member Klein.
It's okay. So I'm looking at, well, I just want to speak in favor of striking that as well. I was curious what that means when it says networking within and beyond national education organizations. What's beyond that?
Well, international would be beyond.
Dr. Thronson, sorry, what was the answer to that?
International would be beyond national.
International.
Do we have teachers involved in international?
Yes, absolutely.
So you have an example, just out of
I,
curiosity?
there's like the Norway, Finland, the exchanges. Is that what your teacher exchanges? Thank you for the visuals. Oh, yeah, the Fulbright scholarships.
Thank you. Board Member Lear.
I'm comfortable that teachers could do what an LEA allowed them to do with or without these lines, but I don't think there's anything about this that requires it. It says may throughout, it says including throughout, and I think any one of these things could be something an LEA supports or doesn't support. So I just want to say publicly that I don't think there's anything that requires these things to be part of what a teacher leader might do.
Thank you. Do you have another comment, Board Member Earl? Seeing no further comment, there's a motion on the floor that an amendment to a motion on the floor that lines
62 and 63.
62 and 63 be removed from R277-307 Draft 3. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Those in favor, please raise your hands. That's Board Member Moss, Board Member Earl, Board Member Hutchings, and Board Member Klein, and Vice Chair Belknap. That motion fails. we have a motion on the floor that the board approves R277-307 Teacher Leader Draft 3 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Couldn't the noes raise their hands? Board Member Earl and Board Member Klein are opposed. Seeing no discussion, there's a motion on the floor that the board repeals R277-513, teacher leader on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Sorry, let me say that again. Item 10.4, the discussion was of R277-301, educator licensing, an amendment and a continuation. The committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-301, educator licensing, draft 1 on second and final reading.
There's a motion on the floor that the board continue and approve R277-301, educator licensing, draft 1 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Item 10.5, the discussion of the Utah Adult Education Program Supervision Study. The committee moves that the board approve the adult education staff to move forward with the study to determine if the program supervision should move to USHE or USHE.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the board approves the adult education staff to move forward with a study to determine if the program supervision should move to USHE. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Sorry, did you have a comment?
I have a question on that one. It's okay. It's not going to change anything. Are there, may I ask?
Go ahead.
Chair? Thank you. Is there any additional cost to doing this study than what is already being done in the job that is out there?
They didn't give us any.
I'm not the expert on that, but I understood this is already a study that's sort of in process.
Come on up.
You're saying
Someone
no? Okay,
over-
I'll take a no, Leah. Thank you.
Okay, Chair Lear.
Item 10.4, 10.6, I'm sorry, I'm getting my numbers
Laura,
all
I'm
confused.
sorry.
This is an SOEP working group request. The committee moves that the board direct staff and key SOEP group members to work with Representative Birkeland and other related legislators to refile and amend to 2021 HB 382 online course access amendments.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the board directs staff and key SOEP group members to work with Representative Birkeland and other related legislators to refile and amend 2021 HB 382 online course access amendments. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
Item 10.7, R277-477, distributions of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program, an amendment and continuation. The committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-477, distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the board approves and continues R277-477, distributions of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program, draft 1 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
Item 10.8, discussion of R277-491, school community councils, an amendment, proposed amendment and continuation. The committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-491, school community councils, draft 1 on second and final reading.
There's a motion on the floor that the board continues and approves R277-491, school community councils, draft 1 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
Item 10.9, R277-925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program, an amendment and continuation.
Okay.
The committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading.
There's a motion that the board approves R277-925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading. Board Member Earl.
Yeah, I have just a couple of questions. Is this the program that, it wasn't a lot of funding, but it was primarily restricted to just beginning teachers? Am I accurate in saying, no, this isn't, okay. Sorry, I'm mixing those up. I apologize. I should have double-checked on this earlier. But and then the second question she can answer with this is expanding it to special education, or it was already included?
So
Okay,
Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools is basically, before it was grades 4 through 8. If you had successful MGP on the RISE assessment, you were eligible for this if you served in a eligible school. What the recent one was added K3 and the Acadience reading data to be eligible in the kindergarten through third grade space. So now it's a K8 program.
Okay, so it's extending that. That's not, okay. That's why I was kind of mixing the two programs to make sure I was understanding those.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Straight.
Does the formula include growth?
I'm trying to remember on this one. For MGP, it is growth, so on Acadience, we did growth as well. So it's more about moving kids than necessarily proficiency of students.
Since it includes, I have several questions, is that okay? Since it includes 7th and 8th grade, but it doesn't include, is it divided between the subject that the student has, or?
Yeah, so it's going to be your ELA, math, or science. Whatever teacher was the responsible person for the ELA test, there's the ELA teachers get rewarded, the math teachers and the science teachers, so all the state accountability assessments. So if you're a social studies teacher, you would not be awarded this because you are not in a tested grade.
I know.
Even though it's a system, that is one of the conversations people have had. Should we reward the school rather than the teacher? Because it is, especially in secondary where other teachers are having impact.
What does the research show in regards to what makes high growth among students? Does it show that it takes the whole school community, or does it show that it's one teacher?
I don't know that the research that I've read has determined that. When you're saying increasing reading, that's a hard one to say it's only related to the reading teacher, for example, because they might be reading across the school day in other content areas. And so on English language arts, math, I think you'd have a hard time to say math is being influenced by other departments, where English language arts could easily be being improved or enhanced through the instruction of other educators in the building. Just because more people incorporate reading, writing, and speaking into their courses versus mathematics type concepts.
You have one more follow-up?
Yeah, one more. Do teachers have to apply for this, or are they identified and then given an application? What's the process?
Yeah, for this one, they're identified, and then if the LEA wants, there's a match required. If the LEA is willing to match, then they can be awarded. If the LEA is not willing to do the match, then they're not awarded.
So what is the rate of teachers that actually, I mean, do most LEAs do that? or-
Most, yes, most are
Okay.
matching. And this
That's my
bill actually
questions.
increased the match. It's a more sizable kind of buy-in from the LEA because it's a more sizable stipend.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, I think it's probably also important to note that this comes from code, and so it's updated for code. Yeah, not necessarily initiated by board rule also. Board Member Earl?
Sorry, that just made me start thinking, which could be dangerous, I guess, but, well, no, it has to do with the measurement tool itself.
It's a good
and that
teacher, right?
And I know we got a lot of data last year, so maybe this isn't as broad of a concern, but it doesn't necessarily speak to what a teacher did and how much effort they put in, or how much growth really was there, based on a lot of what took place last year. So are we using data from previous years, or will we be incorporating the data from this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the data goes back 2 years because you have to do growth, and so it's an odd,
And it's
odd
off.
project. And
Yep.
so we've had to make modifications to which years are we looking at for that growth to be sure teachers are still eligible. The nice thing is it's still the complete sample of teachers. So you're being compared to other teachers that experience the same, similar situations. And so the growth is going to still have a top tier of the teachers getting there because you are using the entire population that was eligible
And
for
is
this.
it, are we seeing it's the same teachers year after year? Sorry, Chair, is that okay?
No, it does vary year to year.
Okay.
I mean, we see some, but the vast majority is actually kind of a mix because the school might have been eligible one year and now they're not eligible any longer, those kinds of things.
And then just one last question. Do we have a survey at all, or some kind of feedback from educators themselves on the effectiveness of this program based on the measurement tool we're using and the way we're implementing it?
We have an evaluation report of the program. We don't ask teachers for feedback on that. It's just, are they staying at that school? Are they staying in the profession? Those types of data points are available, and I can send the report to the board if you would like.
Okay.
Thank you. Board Member Hart.
If a teacher is coded as a co-teacher and is a special ed teacher, do they receive the funding too because they are a co-teacher in that classroom?
It would be the person who is designated in your cactus
Right,
system, because you know how they're assigned?
Right, but they can,
If
two of
they
them
are,
can.
then yes.
Then both would,
Yeah,
okay.
so if they're both assigned to that particular course code, that is the
Exactly.
eligibility, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Board Member Hymas.
You say you go back 2 years worth, can a first-year teacher, like, let's say that I'm a teacher and I'm not very good, and Board Member Hanson comes in and just kills it, can he get, or does it have to be?
Yeah, so it's on that teacher, it's the growth of 2 years of the student, because they
Okay.
need the prior year data to see how well they grew
Not
from the
teacher,
previous
just
year.
student. Thank you.
Yep.
Seeing no further comment.
Oh, no, I'm just.
No,
ready.
but someone just popped up that said, that's you. Now you're showing up as me.
I've been you this whole time.
Okay, I'll take that as a compliment. Board Member Belknap.
So I'm curious, and maybe I'm just reading this wrong. Why is this rule seems to be all about grade 4? And shouldn't it be inclusive of all of the pieces?
So the amendments, we updated this when the code passed last year.
Yeah.
And then the trick with grade 4 is you don't have growth data that we normally would have because of the non-testing year in 2020. So grade 4, we have to have a kind of stopgap to deal with the lack of assessment data because you can't use growth for grade 4 because there's no third grade assessment. if
Thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Seeing no further comment, we have a motion on the floor. Find it again. That the board approves R277-925, effective teachers in high-poverty schools incentive program draft 1 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Last item is item 10.10. This is a new board policy, policy number 2004. This, as you'll recall, was one that was taken from the bylaws in our bylaw discussion, and the decision was to make it a separate policy. It's a little bit additionally complicated because Member Klein brought up in the committee that there were some comments made during the board bylaw discussion that we wanted to add to this policy. So there are some additions to the policy from the bylaw discussion. And those, though we didn't see them during the meeting, some of us remembered them, some of them remembered them, and we agreed that they would be added to this and put before the board for discussion today, and approval or not. So the committee moves that the board approve Board Policy 2004 and request staff to prepare a draft 2 of Board Policy 2004, which we have, I think, to include amendments considered and approved by the board in the board's May 6th meeting.
Thank
this
you.
is-
There's a motion on the floor that the board approves Board Policy 2004 and requests staff to prepare a draft 2 of Board Policy 2004 to include amendments considered and approved by the board in board's May 6th board meeting. Board Member Earl.
I would like to make a motion, amendment to the motion. I would like to amend that we strike all of external advocacy, everything underneath that particular section, and replace it with, Jeff?
Is this, yeah.
I
Is
sent
this
an
in
email
backup,
with
Board
it.
Member Earl?
No.
Okay.
I sent an email a little earlier, so. It would state, Utah State Board members serve and represent the constituents in their community which may not be restricted or impaired by the membership on or obligations to the Utah State Board of Education. B, the Utah State Board of Education is committed to free and open inquiry in all matters. Open and vigorous debate and deliberation shall not be suppressed because the ideas put forth are thought to be offensive, unwise, immoral, or simply wrong. C, expressions that violate the law, that falsely defame a specific individual, that constitute a genuine threat or harassment, that unjustifiably invade substantial privacy or confidentiality interest may be restricted.
You sent that to all board members, right? Just a little bit ago?
Yeah.
Can you
yes.
forward that, one of you, to Sybil, please? Our wonderful executive
And,
assistant.
and then I have a
Am I
separate
getting that
board,
right?
I have a separate email too, so I didn't get it, but.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, Board Member Moss is seconding. Would you like to discuss?
Yeah, I'd like to just speak to it. I think what we have listed currently, we're not saying what is supposed to happen, so to speak. So when we're talking about external advocacy, there should be a standard set, and then the restrictions provided on here should be clear too. When we're sending it out and saying, well, anyone that's critical of an individual or a group, that's a pretty broad analysis, because someone may take something to be critical that, and at that, we're intended to be critical of different things. So I'm not sure that really meets what we want to have happen here as far as external advocacy. And so that's why I've recommended the 3 items that I've recommended.
Thank you. Any discussion to the motion?
Can we scroll up to see what we're deleting?
That's what we're deleting, I think.
Oh, wait, so we're deleting.
Chair, can I quickly explain what you're looking at? What you see highlighted in gray is the current draft 2, which is being proposed to be deleted. What you see in red was what was put in during the bylaws discussion in May. So that was added per the request of the committee from last month. So this would be now the current draft 2, proposed to delete this entirely and replace it with the green that's above that I can jump back to if anyone wants to read that.
Which is what Jenny's proposing.
Correct.
You have a question?
This would be just section 1A. It just says D because of the auto formatting from the.
Thank you. Discussion to the stated motion. Oh, did we have a second? Oh, Board Member Moss. Discussion to the stated motion.
Thanks, Matt.
Board Member Klein.
I was just, the part in red is not actually what Article 5, 4A and B says. So I think Jeff said that was taken from Article 5, 4A, but if you actually look at the board bylaw, that's not what 4A and B says.
Can we check that?
Yes, so that's referring to Article subsection 4A and B, not saying what it says, if that makes sense.
Oh, it's a
But the
So
reference.
it's a
context
reference
is
to
different
what is in
even.
the bylaws.
Would you like to speak to the motion, Board Member Klein?
Well, I'm in favor of Jenny's amendment.
Okay, and then when we get back to the original motion, then you want to speak on that part?
need be.
If this
Yeah.
part doesn't pass? Okay. Board Member Moss.
I just have a concern that's similar to the last one. I think the breadth of this, I just think is too broad. I favor civility, I try to practice civility, but I don't think I can stop somebody from criticizing me in my board member actions or saying that I'm a blithering idiot, which would reflect on my reputation, and perhaps correctly. I don't, I may be a blithering idiot on any given day. I don't think we should be going that broad and restraining the ability to criticize. So I think that language has good intentions, but perhaps from a First Amendment perspective, certainly I think from a prohibition on unhealthy debate, I just think it goes too far. So I think that the amendment does a better job of prohibiting things which are truly, harassing and bullying, that type of thing, defamation, without inhibiting, good, honest criticism that might sometimes sting.
Thank you. We have any other discussion? I'll just say, I think some of what is here is not in the amended language, so I'll be voting no on this, but I wouldn't be opposed if we bring it back again, if this passes, bring it back again next month and add to what is here and clarify it so that it's less broad. Board Member Lear?
I can I make a substitute motion?
Can she make a substitute motion? Go ahead.
For two reasons. I think there is a decided lack of understanding among board members, and some of us just barely got this
Wait,
language.
before you speak, we need the
Oh,
substitute motion.
You're right. I would like to postpone the discussion of this and have a more robust committee discussion of the whole issues, because our committee discussion was not particularly, I would have loved to have had this to process in the committee, and we didn't have it. Oh, so I'd like to, I still keep digressing, I'm sorry. I'd like to postpone this and discuss it again in committee and not vote this up or down right now.
Does that motion supersede the motion, the amendment? And do we need a second for this motion? Do we have a second on this
Second.
motion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to postpone the conversation and send it back to committee for a more robust conversation. Would this be in committee meeting tomorrow?
We could do it in committee meeting tomorrow, except it hasn't been posted for 24 hours.
So it'd be in December?
December.
It would go back to leadership, I'm hearing.
All right, we could be wherever we appropriately send it for further discussion by a committee.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to postpone the discussion and send it back to leadership for consideration to be placed on an agenda in the committee. Do we have a second? Board Member Straight? Do you want to speak to your motion?
I think, I'm not in a position, I hear what Member Moss is saying, he's making some good points, but I'm also really reluctant to let go of some of the language that is in the gray language. Again, reminding ourselves that we're setting ethical standards for ourselves, and they might be narrower than what the law might allow, but that is okay with me as an education leader. So I think we need to more carefully consider what those standards should be, and I think we need some good legal advice about where the parameters, how wide they can be, what the implications are about their breadth, and I think we just need to discuss this more carefully because it has personal implications as well as the reputational interests of the board.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
I actually would speak in favor of this. I do think there needs to be more dialogue along these lines. And once again, I get this information, like the rest of the board, and then have to filter through it and see, okay, what does this mean? And so I do apologize. Sometimes it takes me, my deliberation is not as quick as everybody else's. I'm sorry about that. But I do think it does warrant more discussion, and so I would be in favor of this motion.
Seeing no other discussion, there is a motion on the floor to postpone discussion and send it back to leadership for potential inclusion on a upcoming committee. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
That completes our report. Thank you, Chair.